What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
This is San Francisco.
Welcome back to San Francisco. Something I'm always thinking about is how we could do anything we want. We, meaning marginalized people, meaning the left. We could do anything we want if we had the resources of the police. And with these giant budget-sucking operations that are police, there's no excuse for austerity politics. Anytime that a politician tries to shove the idea of austerity down your throat, as in politicians, saying that we got to defund healthcare, or we don't have enough money for kids' school lunch programs, we got to defund universities or up the tuitions. There would be enough money for all of it and more if there were no police. In San Francisco specifically, police budget is close to $1 billion, but that is a misleading number because San Francisco also has a sheriff's department. The sheriff's department has a few hundred more $1 million, in addition to park rangers, probation officers, private security guards, urban alchemy, UC cops, city college cops, BART cops, Muni cops, highway patrol. You got the National Guard in the Tenderloin, supposedly, although I haven't seen them recently. Is there anyone that is hiring for a job that does not involve coppery? Right now, the city of LA is on the precipice of going bankrupt because of how much money they're spending on cop raises and how much money that they're spending on paying settlements to people who are abused by the cops, because taxes also pay for the millions of dollars in lawsuits settled around cops' behavior. In San Francisco, there is a department within the SFPD that is strictly related to PR. And one of our politicians, Supervisor Matt Dorsey, is the ex-head of cop PR. He was put into City Hall by the mayor, London Breed, specifically with the goal of moving more money to the police. I get very stressed out about this topic, and it's helpful to know that other people are similarly stressed out. And so today we have Cynthia and Jenica from Lavender Phoenix, the queer and trans Asian and Pacific Islander group in town that is organizing around defunding the cops. We also have Anya from People's Budget Coalition here to talk about it and here to stress out about it with me.
Hello everyone, co-producer and editor Tofu here. Before we continue with the episode, I just want to plug our Patreon. If you want early access to our episodes and bonus behind-the-scenes content, you can sign up at patreon.com/SanFrancisco. Shout out to Sabrina for supporting the show. We appreciate you and everyone else that signs up for the Patreon. You can also support us by giving us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, liking and commenting on the YouTube videos, and sharing the show to your friends. That's it for me. Thank you so much for letting me yap, and now on to the episode.
Hello. Stoked to be here with Cynthia and Jenica from Lavender Phoenix and Anya from SF Rising, who I have been wanting to reach out to for a while. Thank you all for coming through. We're recording this on a Sunday. So Sunday just turned 12 hours old. Thank you for coming through. I wanted to start out by just asking you all to intro yourselves a little bit, how you came to this work around defunding the cops.
I'll jump in and say hi. Thank you again for having us. I'm Cynthia. I use they, them pronouns. I am our lead organizer here at Lavender Phoenix.
My name's Jenica. I'm the cultural organizer with Lavender Phoenix.
Hi, I'm Anya. I'm here on behalf of just kind of my role in budget advocacy. So can't speak on behalf of San Francisco Rising, but I am the coalition coordinator for the People's Budget Coalition. So while I can't speak on their behalf, I'm definitely here in my space as like a budget advocate and a budget expert in City Hall.
And with Lavender Phoenix specifically, could you talk a little bit about how it got started before we get into the cops?
We actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary, Lavender Phoenix, but we were actually formerly known as AAPI Equality Northern California. So Lavender Phoenix was actually founded in 2004, and it was a response to the fact that, that was a year a lot of stuff around Prop 8 was happening. Marriage equality was like a huge issue. And in San Francisco specifically, there was actually a lot of Chinese Christians who were coming out against gay marriage. So in 2004, there was like actually a 6,000 person rally of Chinese people on the West Side that came out. And Lavender Phoenix kind of started as a response to some of those pressures.
Last year, actually, in 2023, we were doing like a lot of like safety training with like our community, especially with the campaign we were doing, Justice for Jackson Solis. Jackson was a young man who was found dead in a high-rise apartment in San Francisco, and there's been like no accountability around this case. We were working really closely with like his family, his parents, to really demand justice for him. And we were doing like pod mapping, like June of last year for Pride Month. But something we kind of realized, like while we're like advocating for like this kind of like safety for our community, the people in power really are voting on budgets that, really affect the survival of our communities. And so going into 2024, we really made like a pivot and asking like, what can we do to really change like these power dynamics like in our community that continue to kill like our trans and queer community? So that's really how we got started with the You're Not Cops campaign and organizing around that.
Cool. I became aware of you all through that campaign. Did not know that you all went back that far. First time that I became aware of this idea that you can get some of our people, some Asian Americans, to go out and support some issues that may not necessarily be that beneficial to most of our community, but sort of couch it in, oh, this is like Asian American issue. Thinking like specifically about when Akai Gurley was killed in New York City by Peter Liang, an NYPD officer. So Akai was Black, Peter was an Asian American officer. He was actually fired, which is a very unusual, with cops, like you kind of like expect they're going to get immunity when they kill somebody. In this case, he was not. And so on both coasts, you had these big groups of Asian Americans coming out to like be in support of this cop who killed this civilian. And it was like screwing with my head. This was like back in, I want to say like 2014. But for the Lavender Phoenix people, like, how did you all come to this work from like a personal point of view? If you had connections to, queer trans people who have faced this kind of like cop violence, or maybe you yourself have as well?
Yeah, I remember the story of Akai Gurley, and it really was devastating to see how certain Chinese people rallied in defense of Peter Liang for the reasons that they did. And also, I should say, I just shared the history of our organization. It's actually not new, like in the sense that API folks, Asian folks, and in the Bay Area, Chinese people specifically are used as a wedge for a lot of things. I'll say briefly, like, what kind of brought me to this work and what made me realize like that we really need true care and not police. It's something that I feel like I find over and over again. I grew up in the East Bay. I grew up in a working class family, an immigrant family. And my mom actually converted to Christianity when I was really young. So that was a huge part of my upbringing. Fast forward to most like recently, I worked at a nonprofit that supported tenants facing evictions during COVID. And even in those spaces, like I wanted to see like what happens when we try to care for people and what's the interaction between that and policing. And despite kind of, we fought for the tenant right to counsel, we worked really hard in those clinics, but time and time again, I watched as police were ordered to protect like property over people. That's families, our elders, immigrants, working class folks who have been in the city for 10, 20, 30 years, rent control places that are affordable. And for a misstep, one thing or another, or even during COVID, you know, where so many people lost their jobs and we're struggling to make ends meet. Despite that, we still order the police to protect property. And these are kind of the stories that keep me up at night, people that I still wonder about, folks who I consider to be part of my community. And it's actually everywhere once you start to look, I think. But that's like a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. Jenica, yeah, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, for like kind of talking about like kind of like personal moments or like experiences that kind of politicized us. Yeah, I just remember like in 2014, right? Like after Eric Garner, like Michael Brown were murdered. I was actually in high school and like I was attending an all-girls Catholic school like in the Bay. And yeah, the student population obviously is like mostly like upper class, like white families. And I remember like coming to school like a few days after Michael Brown was murdered. And there was just like such a huge gap and like how like both my peers and like also my teachers were reacting or like not even reacting, right, to the news, like not even like recognizing it as like something that is like newsworthy. And it was just like really jarring for me like as a kid to like see how divorced like my community like was from like the reality and like the conditions. And I just remember like being censored by my school. Like I was like in theater at the time. Like I wrote in my bio like Black Lives Matter, and then they rewrote it to be like All Lives Matter.
Oh, wow.
And so like there's a paper out there where it's like Jenica says all lives matter, but like I didn't say that. But yeah, like you know, like I'm a kid like witnessing death after death, like militarized response from the police, violence against protesters, and like using what little voice I thought I had and then being censored. Like that experience like deeply politicized me when I was like in high school growing up in the Bay, and like just like really exposed to me like how much work is needed to like change the system.
Yeah, to even like take your voice away. But I'm glad you're able to set the record straight a bit here. This is all very helpful. Anya, did you want to also like talk about the People's Budget Coalition briefly and then talk about how you got into it?
Yeah, the People's Budget Coalition is the largest budget advocacy coalition in San Francisco. We are made up of 150 or more organizations and nonprofits and labor unions. So we're a force to be reckoned with, and we are pretty new. We have roots going back to forever. We're far from the first People's Budget in San Francisco, but we are sort of the latest iteration. Every time there's an economic crisis, the budget advocacy community reinvents itself, and I see this is the reinvention that has come about over the past couple of years directly in response to the existence of a solid social safety net during COVID to the complete absence of it and the quiet defunding of that. So I'm coming from a perspective of the nonprofit providers who do the services, and my mission and in like my personal self is to get the connection between our electoral work, our politicians, our candidates, all the people interested in local politics, and our city budget, because it matters so much. Like nothing happens in the city unless there's a dollar attached to it. So it is so critical. So I'll say anything to beg people to look into it. And then also like a note on, if you start to pay attention to the city budget, you will feel confused and lost and frustrated. And that's normal. And not only is it normal, it's expected of you. And they are relying on the fact that you will get confused and that you will disengage and that you will accept that what the mayor says is true about the budget. And there are just so many ways that you can spin numbers in order to make them tell the story that you want them to say. So I would offer to people to find a source that they trust on the budget, and I hope that it is the People's Budget, to find just a trustworthy source of somebody until we can fix how inaccessible this system is. find somebody who you can trust, who does already understand the system, who can see through the bullshit a little bit. And how I got into this work myself was I came from a background of working like as a little intern on the city budget, but I like very quickly got into positions of influence within the city budget just based off the fact that most people don't understand the budget. So just from holding the knowledge that I did, I had this ability to see what was going on behind these closed doors. And I was devastated. And I will never forget or let the city forget how in 2021, we defunded food programs and we took back like every dollar that we had pretended to defund from the police. Every dollar was given right back the very next year. It was a hard line too, like that the city drew. Don't touch the cops. Don't touch the cop budget, or this budget is not going to go through. And it's what we negotiate against every single year without fail.
Yeah, it is, like you said, frustrating to see that this is the one section of the budget that never either gets cut, or it is always like consistently, even in times where everything else is getting cut, this is the one part that the number keeps going up. Even during COVID, like the amount of COVID relief funds, we did an episode on this last year, how much COVID relief funds, not just in San Francisco, but across the country, that the federal government was sending to all of these mayors across the country, how much of that actually just went to the cops. This money that was for like public health, and then now it's going to this public health hazard, the cops. Every few months, I feel like there's another like celebrity or quasi-celebrity who's coming out with like a quote about how we need to like refund the cops, and defund the cops didn't work, but we never defunded the cops. It's like straight up lies. Mark Benioff of Salesforce was the last person that like I noticed was like spouting this over and over again. Would one of you kind of like speak to that, how like this lie gets propagated?
Yeah, let's set the record straight. The police are robbing us, and they've actually never stopped. Not only because of the actual like murdering and death that happens, Bango Brown for like literally $10 at Walgreens. Amonte Hadley, who wasn't even charged with a crime, like literally passed away at 850 Bryant. Like death is the results. Like every time we choose to invest in police over people. And we see that not only here in San Francisco, but like even broadly, like when climate chaos strikes, like Hurricane Helene, so many lives lost, billions of dollars in damage. But what did we do the next day? The United States sent $9 billion straight to Israel for Palestine and against Lebanon. What the hell are we doing all the way over there when we can't even afford to house and feed our own people? It's actually frightening because, and Anya and I were kind of reflecting on this, like this question of like truth here and whether or not that really matters. I think about how the police are robbing us, and it's rich coming from someone like Mark, who is also robbing us. That's the nature of being a billionaire. But I think there's actually something deeper here, which there's like emotional manipulation around like the facts and what facts you choose, stories you choose to tell about whatever numbers you might have. And I think that needs to be organized around.
Yeah, as I was there, like in like the direct aftermath of the defunding of the police, like walking it through, and there were some supervisors who was like, we defunded the police last year, and I had to sit down and walk them through. I was like, you took 30 million proposed increase to the cop budget, and you gave it to community programs. And that was very cool, and that was very good. The cop budget never decreased. It never happened. Like it never happened. And it's hilarious now that that's being used now against London Breed, the main proponent of cops. She always draws a hard line because it gets her votes with the wealthy, who are the most likely to vote.
Which are the people that benefit from having the cops to sort of like play security guard for their interests, I think. Kind of, yeah, the guard dogs of the elite. And now we have so many different layers of them. I always like to quickly count down all the layers that are in the neighborhood that I live in, the TL Tenderloin. I mean, we have park rangers, we have the cops, we have the sheriffs, because San Francisco is a city and a county. So for some reason, we need both sheriffs and cops. We have Urban Alchemy, which is another layer of police, a nonprofit that's contracted by the city to provide additional sort of security force. We have the California Highway Patrol in San Francisco in the Tenderloin. We also have the National Guard. I don't see them out there very often, but maybe I don't know. They're still getting paid to be here. And I feel like I'm missing. Oh, the UC cops. We have BART. We have Muni. It just, yeah. I mean, I know that I'm probably missing a few, but thank you. Yeah, Anya, that is super helpful. Perks for people who don't know, the cops are not only very well paid, starting salaries over 100K. You get some benefits around housing and education. Each of you had a perk that you would say annoys you the most that we give to the guard dogs for the elite. What would that be?
I have to jump in and say there's one that you missed, and I feel like I have to say it. It's DPH.
Oh, yeah.
The way that we've been, this connection between the medical and prison industrial complex, not only in San Francisco, but California overall, our approach to health, mental health. It's actually kind of wild. This is a good question. I'm going to have to think about my actual answer, but it just made me think resources are so finite. And if you aren't paying attention, it's kind of funny. Police have become the solution for everything, actually. Unhoused people, more police. Kids or bad kids, whatever that means, more police. Mm-hmm. Mental health, police. Drugs on our street, police. And it's wait, that can't be right. Yeah. And it's frustrating because even on our ballot this November, we're going to be talking about pensions. So it's even after they've done and controlled us, through that role of being police, we want to talk about more public resources after they're done with that role to make it more incentivized, actually. And that feels really frustrating because they're doing it along with it's the police one, and then there's nurses and 911 operators. And I'm this, and how this question's being asked even.
Yeah. I mean, not only another thing that I'm reminded of as you're saying that is how SFPD officers are the highest paid police officers in the state, according to the last, I think it's the FBI was the organization that did an assessment of how much cops get paid. And that's another lie that gets propagated by people who are supported by the cops and in turn want to move more funds back to the cops, is that, oh, our officers aren't getting paid enough. They are. And there's no excuse for austerity in any other realm until we wrest away money from the cops. There's I just think about how we could just fund it all, I know it gets boring to hear how much we spend on the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, the cop industrial complex, but it's just the truth. There's so much money is going in this direction, and it is so frustrating.
I just think about the excessive overtime pay.
Yeah.
Police get really messed up. There was that Chronicle article that came out, right? That one police officer had made 456K in overtime, and that's more than London Breed's salary. So,
yeah.
How is that possible? You are making more than enough salary for one person when the housing crisis is so intensified, when the economic it's just horrible. And you're also being paid to help with sweeping these unhoused encampments. It's just horrible to see that this one person gets so much wealth over the majority of the city.
Totally. And some of the things that they are sent in to do, I think about the Dolores Hill Bomb, which is this annual skating event that happens in the Mission. And it was like over 300K portioned out just for overtime for the cops that came to this event that happens on a weekend. That, I mean, Pride is another big one. Like, gay pride is like a big deal in San Francisco. It's commerce. It's a little bit of culture thrown in there. But the cops inevitably are on the take. They get so much money as far as overtime for that weekend in June. Earlier this year, when Humboldt, like CSU Humboldt, was on lockdown around protests around Palestine, we sent SFPD officers up to Humboldt getting overtime to go, assault some students in Humboldt. So it's just like, it is like really crazy making to me. I think like if you hear about these things and it doesn't make you a little crazy, then there maybe is something wrong with you. I'm not going to like take that on. I'm going to say like everybody who hears about this should be a little bit mad about it, except for the cops themselves and except for the people that benefit the most from having the cops on their side, which is not most people. Where are those cops when, you're calling them and you're in Hunters Point and like part of the city that the cops just don't feel like, showing up at to like help you out? Or if they do, who's to say they're not going to like target you as the person that is at fault. Also wanted to talk about if there are any gratifying moments in this work around the cops for you. I know that you've been doing it for a minute now and talked about like some of your moments of politicization around this issue. What's a moment that like keeps you coming back to this in a good way?
There's so much grief, anger, rage that can motivate and bring us back to this work. But there's also a lot of like hope and protagonism that we want to show up for. And I think a moment that stands out to me is, been a long time member of this organization before joining staff. And I actually watched this organization change. You mentioned Pride, which I'm so glad you did, not because, we like Pride. It's actually the opposite. In 2019, Lavender Phoenix actually won the Pride like Grand Marshal thing by community vote. And I remember in that moment thinking to myself, oh, hell no. Right? Oh, hell no, right? Because we can't, like, we're not, as an organization, we've been to Trans March. We just did our 10th, like, API contingent at Trans March. We've always been very, like, clear internally about our politics, and we wanted to show up and represent that. We wore all Black. We brought, like, it was like a memorial style contingent that Sunday with a police out of Pride banner. And when I say to you that people like spit at us actually while we were walking down Market. And I remember thinking to myself, like, is it worse that we show up here or is it worse if we like didn't, And at the same time, like I felt like this incredible amount of hope because in this organization with like mostly young trans and queer API people, like we all actually have a lot to lose. Like there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of like internal debate that we were like, should we do this? Like, is it too hard for us? Like, is it appropriate of us to show up in this way? And these like internal conversations that it prompted that led us there. That's what I feel was like really gratifying. This is like before we changed our name to Lavender Phoenix. Back then we did a lot of like cultural history, like intergenerational work, which is like kind of what taught us these lessons. And then seeing that bring us to that place, it was like something I'll never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that the connection part, like the connection between people who have a shared consciousness about an issue that like means something to them and that they just really care about gets like kind of pushed away as like, oh, this is just like little side effect. But that is the thing that so many people who like I know or have been on this podcast, like that they say like keeps them coming back to the work. If it weren't for those moments, even if like the thing that you're connecting around is really shitty, that human connection is a huge part of like, I don't know, like if this work wasn't happening, like maybe the cop budget would be twice as big. We don't know. And of course, like successes are so hard to measure around this. And so, yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that, Cynthia. Like, I think, yeah, coming back to that and realizing like, oh, I actually care about the people that I'm organizing with. That's like so important.
Yeah, I know for myself that I definitely I'll always keep coming back because every year we have a rally around Public Comment Day, and we rally and we say like we really emphasize like the care part of Care Not Cops. Like we show all the good that we do, and it is a complicated and messy budget, and so much work goes into Public Comment Day and what we're focusing on. It takes so much to unwind all of the lies and figure out what's going on. And then you get to Public Comment Day, and there are hundreds of people at this rally and parents and kids, and it becomes so clear that they don't need to know the intricacies of this budget. They don't need to know all the ways in which this budget is a lie and to how it's funding the cops. They know what their community needs, and they are tired of seeing their resources go to the cops. And that's what keeps me coming back. Like we can lose on the getting the record straight. We can lose on so many fronts, but our community knows what the truth is, and they know what we need to keep each other safe. So that's
For
one of the
sure.
moments that ignite me.
Yeah, yeah, you don't need like an economics degree. You don't need a like 10-year history of experience showing up at city council meetings to know there is something amiss when you see, yeah, like that number keep going up for the cops, and like what exactly are we getting out of it? Jenica, yeah, did you want to share anything?
Yeah, I would say like one of my favorite moments from like our campaign this year was actually like our first action we took, going to City Hall, going to our representative's offices. Like this was like, something really new for like our members at Lavnix. Like, Cynthia was talking about for like a long time. We were like doing advocacy work for like marriage equality and stuff, before like making like a really big pivot to like safety campaigns. But yeah, we like did like a little subtle soft launch where we like emailed like Connie Chan, Aaron Peskin, London Breed's office, like, hey, we're demanding care, not cops. But then our goal for April is like show them we mean it. So we all like mobilized to City Hall. A lot of our members had never actually gone to City Hall before, and we set our demands to each of them. I mean, we only really talked to their aides, right? Like we didn't talk to the or like to Connie Chan, to Aaron Peskin. Actually, like London Breen wasn't even in town. She was in China speaking to like business leaders, airline executives.
Just trying to get that panda come over.
Stop.
Yeah.
But like it's just like really jarring, we're like talking to Connie Chan's aide, and like the TV's playing in the corner, and we see her like in real time footage, like in China, like so jarring.
Hmm.
Like I'm saying the demands to London Breed's aide in front of like this huge ass portrait, like painted portrait of her, which is painted with who knows whose money, probably ours, right? But
Guaranteed.
what was like really beautiful is like we all went to public comment like right afterwards, and it was like all like at least like 12 of us like in a row like saying like our story about like why we're demanding care, not cops. And it was our first action, so like obviously it's not like we got our demands like right after, but it really like was a testament to like what we were talking about earlier with like human connection and like that people power, because you could just feel in the room like the energy and just like how our members like felt so much more consolidated, more like deepened, like in like their commitment to the work. It was like such a beautiful action we took together. And if I could say like one more silly moment, when we were at Transmarch this year, I was a chant lead, and one of the chants we had was bottoms, tops, we all hate cops. And it was so awesome, like
Oh,
seeing
cute. I like
everybody
it.
dancing with us. It was such a great moment.
That is very cute. So I guess like before I let you all go, I had like one question for Lab Phoenix people and then one for you, Anya. Anya, like this is more of like, I suppose, a like boring but important thing. Like how do we keep like money when it gets appropriated from jump, like, with the COVID money, like I don't think very many people were like expecting it to go into this funnel of the cops. Um, so when something is appropriated for something, the people might seem like, oh, this is a good thing, like housing, affordable housing. Um, or like uh alternatives to the cops. How do we keep it from moving back to the cops, because they seem to be a magnet for like, oh, if money goes into the general fund of the city's budget, even if it's appropriated for one thing, it can show up in the budget of the cops the next year.
The first thing I think people can do is just keep your ear to the ground a little bit. They will bury the lead whenever they can, but the budget will always come out publicly and you will always be able to see what money we are getting to the cops. So no matter what, that information will be available to you. So I recommend that folks pay attention when that happens and then try to connect with folks to get like the debrief on like what this actually means. But more importantly than that, we know how to move our supervisors. We talk to them, we outreach, we do public comment. We have these opportunities to speak with them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the sole spending authority in the entire city is the mayor's. We are in a situation right now with people's budget where our money that we won, unanimously approved by the board, is being held up by the mayor. For why? Because she can. That's their aide came to the hearing, and that's at the end of the day, all they could say is that they have the legal authority to do so. So whenever you get the opportunity, keep that mayoral power in check. Like we have so many times when they will try to sneak it in. Maybe it would be good if we had a good mayor that could control the commissions on like what's going on in the city. And we need to beat back this mayoral power. We have our strong mayor system is out of control in the city. But there is one thing that can beat the mayor, and it's our people power. So anywhere we can beat back the mayoral power, doesn't matter who the mayor is, could be nobody, could be a friend, could be anybody we like, doesn't matter. They cannot have this much control over our money. It's just too much.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, abolish mayors, y'all. I think I was like reading about how in the UK, like some towns are starting to like get rid of the post of mayor in favor of like just city councils and like the power being spread out a little bit more. I just don't know if we need a public face of the city if they're going to act like this. Thank you for that, Anya. Lavender Phoenix is traditionally like Asian American org. What SF organizers or Asian American organizers have influenced y'all's politics?
So many, so many. And I love, Anya, what you said to that question, because, I think in this time, we can't afford to not pay attention. And that doesn't mean that you have to be like experts in everything. But I do think like being part of a community means like you're talking to people and we're like paying attention and we're able to like figure out what's actually happening with our resources. And this question about like which organizers, have kind of like inspired that in me. And it's like, there's so many. I was raised by the housing movement here in San Francisco. I feel like that was my first like organizing thing, fighting evictions, fighting rent increases. I was on the West Side and really like in the heart of the nonprofit industrial complex. That's another podcast altogether. But I've actually had like the honor and privilege to really like build with actually so many organizers. And when I say organizer, I mean people who are like contesting power, building up our community and like really serving our people. And that is something that like I couldn't have gotten my what I believe in, what I truly value without it. I also think like, my folks aren't like public figures, so I'm not going to put names on anything or anyone, but I can't say enough that nothing really makes me prouder than Bay Area organizers, actually. Like we fight, we love, we care for each other. And yes, we struggle with each other too. But when I zoom out, there's really no other way like I'd have it. And, for anyone who's looking for a political home, I would really encourage you to keep trying and find it if you haven't. Like if you're somewhere and you're like, I don't know if I rock with them, and you don't want to fight to change it, find somewhere else. Like the Bay Area is so rich. Our legacy is so big. And I just want so deeply for everyone to find like the community of like movement folks, values aligned people that I've also had the privilege of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's always another group. If you have drama in one group, find another one.
Yeah, if I could talk about like local organizers I'm always inspired by. Well, I mean, I'll name one. Like one of my local heroes, right, is Brandon Lee. Love Brandon Lee bad.
Yeah,
We love
Brandon Lee.
him.
Well, I think this will run just after Brandon Lee interview with Brandon Lee that we just did.
Oh my God,
So
awesome.
that's super
Your
cute.
listeners don't need
Yeah.
much context. But yeah, right? Environmentalist, indigenous rights activist, like just always inspired by him. And just like, he continues like to fight, like even in the face of like state violence. But not only that, like always like linking the conditions here to like what's happening like internationally, right? Like he like had this article that he wrote like right around like APEC, like I think it was titled like the forces that nearly murdered me are meeting in San Francisco today. And he like makes the connections like, Biden and Marcos are meeting. San Francisco is requiring all police, all security personnel to work overtime right now. Like what I was talking about earlier, right? And for what? To protect like the people who are actually robbing us,
For sure.
right? While the people are suffering from housing and food insecurity, low wages. And he just makes it clear that like all this violence, all these atrocities would not be possible without US funding and like our money, our tax dollars that are being used to kill activists like him, being used to fund the genocide in Palestine, being used to fund the egregious spending with the budget of SFPD. And like, I'm just always moved because it like feels consolidating to like always remember our struggles are all intrinsically linked, right? Like the work that we do here, like in the States, in San Francisco, it's not divorced from the reality of like what's happening everywhere else in this world. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Yeah, nothing to add. No notes. Thank you so much. Was wondering from both the People's Budget and from both Lavender Phoenix, how can people follow the work or perhaps even get involved?
Yeah, for Lavender Phoenix, follow us on Instagram, Lav Phoenix. We always post our call to actions. We're always talking about our programming. We're always inviting people to come out with us. So find us. We'd love to connect. Yeah.
Yeah, for myself and for the People's Budget, you can follow us. We do have an Instagram as well, SF People's Budget. It's a fairly inactive, but very responsive to I am happy to meet with anybody and give them a deep dive into the budget. Happy to connect orgs and start to spread that power and that connection of if you want to get in deep in this or if you want to get in light into this work, there is space and there is more than enough resources to do so.
Well, thank you so much. Let's defund the cops and perhaps abolish mayors. So happy to have, like, I get to meet people on this podcast that are in the Bay that I have never met before. It's my favorite part of doing this podcast. So super stoked that y'all came through, and we'll see you out at maybe a budget meeting. Who knows? Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much
For having us.
Thank you. Super appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Sad Francisco. I am Toshio Meronek, and my co-producer is Tofu Estolas. Patreon.com/SadFrancisco is where you can find our past episodes and transcripts, and it's also where you can help us out with a donation. And if you do, it comes with some benefits like getting the episodes a few days early and our gratitude for allowing us to keep making this podcast, which we love to do. See you next time in Sad Francisco.